We're talking actors and directors who put on the shows.
We're talking playwrights and designers who you'll want to know.
From the very first rehearsal to the final curtain call.
We might be off Broadway, but we're talking about it all.
'Cause we're two local gals
With global pals, it's everything, everything, everything theater.
with Benita
And Ellen. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Everything Theater Podcast, the podcast where we talk about...
Everything Theater. Hi, I'm Benita Zahn.
And I am Ellen Cribbs. It is lovely to see you today, Benita.
And back at you, I have got to give you big props and a round or two of applause. Your show has opened. You're at Albany Civic Theater, and you are getting beaucoup fabulous reviews, and I can't wait to come see it.
We are. Yes, we're doing Jump at Albany Civic running until February 19th. And we've had a wonderful opening weekend and such lovely comments from people that, because the show is so real and it's touching people, it's impacting them on a very personal level. And people are so excited to see these four fresh faces to Albany Civic. The cast has never been on that stage before, and they are amazing. So people are enjoying being introduced to these four amazing performers.
Monet is in your cast, correct?
Yes, Monet is. He's wonderful.
She's fabulous. She has performed, and I had the good fortune to perform with her in Barbecue a summer ago.
Yes.
And she is just fabulous.
She is the moment that brings me to tears every night.
And I was going to say, she has a way of bringing a whole cast together.
Mm-hmm.
So glue.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yes.
and everybody else. I mean, you've got a fabulous cast. So, Hy-Vee to Albany Civic. If you haven't already planned, buy your tickets and get over there. And, you know, I want to give a little bit of love all around you. A lot of auditions have happened.
Mhm.
Just recently here in the capital region, Schenectady Civic will be mounting The Revolutionists.
Mhm.
Jennifer Van Eiderstein is the director. That goes up the 17th of March. And it's really not too early to start marking your calendars for this.
Yeah.
I mean, going to be here. And SLOC, Schenectady Light Opera, is doing The Wedding Singer.
Mhm.
And that also opens on the 17th. And I want to give a shout out to a theater in New York City that you know, Ellen, you know I love attending, Playwrights Horizon.
Mhm.
It's very affordable as a theater. You sit very close to the performers. They do a lot of new work. You know, the Heidi Chronicles, way back when,
Yeah.
had its first staging there. Driving Miss Daisy, you know, shows that, you know, people would know, but they're opening something called Trees. It's about two siblings in a mercenary kind of world, and they create a new society unwittingly. But while that'll be great, I want to just, they will have some special nights. They call them, actually, this one in particular on the 15th of March called Super Accessibility Night. And there's a local woman who doesn't hear, you know, hearing challenge, whatever, has a profound hearing loss. And then just raised my seat a little. And she's always on the first that the local theater should be signing.
Yes.
So I hear you, Lucy.
Mhm.
And Super Accessibility Night, how accessible you can even bring support animals.
Wonderful.
Theater. So if you want to make a trip down to the city, they want you. And special price tickets, they start at $30. So, you know, we can as a community. We talk a lot about how do you bring in an audience.
Yeah.
It's accessible.
Yes, absolutely.
And our guest tonight hails from New York City. He's performed locally, and he's got a story to tell of his own kind of accessibility. Edward Miskey, turn on that camera. Look at that handsome face there.
Yeah.
How are you,
you?
Benita? I'm good. How are you?
Oh, great. Now you got to meet Ellen. For transparency, those of you who follow Park Playhouse, Edward was a star. We had a chance to grace the stage in Washington Park back in, what did we say? It was 2019?
2017.
2017. We lost 3 years, you know, the
Yeah.
pandemic. And you were father in Ragtime.
I was.
and
And you were Emma.
Emma Goldman, which I
Oh,
just played again in another show.
oh my God, you're such a star.
I just have the accent. But Edward's joining us tonight because you are your own tour de force. You know, you sing, perform, produce. But we came out of this from the accessibility comment. A decade ago, you battled and survived a very rare kind of lymphoma and wrote a book
Yes,
about it.
I did both of those things. Yes.
And you were a kid when you were stricken.
Essentially, yeah, I was 24 going on 25 and found a little lump under my arm, like very textbook, and it just kind of literally exploded from there. Over the next couple months, I was doing hairspray somewhere else, and the tumor went from like being a tiny little grape size to a grapefruit size. And I just kind of came back from that contract into the city and in a very whirlwind kind of way went from doctor to doctor to blood test to biopsy, and by the first week of December I was in my first round of chemo.
You've written a book about it, and
I
you're really
have.
launching it. Why?
Yes. A couple reasons. The first, I guess, most obvious reason is that this is my 10-year cancer survivor anniversary. I am a sole survivor of this type. I've never had a recurrence, and I've lived as long as I have, and I don't believe that there is another case of that nature for this particular type. It's a rare and large B-cell Burkitt's-like non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. A mouthful. And so I wanted to reissue the book for that. I had originally published it in 2017, self-published, did it myself, and kind of was a little too busy to really do much with it. So this year I actually found a real publisher and got it published. It's in 30 plus different retailers across the internet, across the globe. And I just really wanted to turn it into something that I was proud of, that looked and read and came across as something that I could stand by. And before I just kind of slapped it together, like it was a book I wrote in a year. I'm still very proud of the book itself, but the design of it was lacking for me. And so just kind of reissuing it to celebrate this milestone was really important for me to do.
It's called Cancer, Musical Theater, and Other Chronic Illnesses.
Yes, it is.
And you got more going on with this. We'll get to that. But who do you want it to reach, Edward?
I wrote this because I had a few conversations with other people who were cancer survivors who were feeling the same way that I did, which was kind of lost and unsure what I was doing with my life and why I felt the way I felt about the people I was around and the things I was pursuing professionally or otherwise, and just this weird displaced kind of like, what am I doing? Like, this is so frustrating. And after having spoken with them, like a couple in a row, I made the decision to write about it because it just hit me like, this is the story to talk about. I always knew I wanted to write something, but I didn't know what it was. I didn't know if it was going to be a show or a play or a one-man situation, which I typically can't stand, and especially coming from me. But it ended up turning into a book, and it was for people who may have gone through a similar circumstance and experienced cancer, coming out on the other side and looking around and not recognizing the world that they were living in now.
And you're not done with this. It's not just a book. You're looking to, if you will, put it on stage.
No, actually, I'm looking to put it on screen.
Well, perform. My bad.
Yes. Yeah, I'm working on it now. With a couple people. We're adapting it to be a musical TV show, like Crazy Ex-Girlfriend or Zoe's Playlist or Glee, even something along those lines. That's just kind of glossy and in your face funny, but has a darker kind of component narrative underneath it.
Wow, that's wonderful. How did I'm curious, just hearing you talk about how it impacted your view of the world. How did going through the treatment and then ultimately being through the treatment process, how did that impact your relationship with theater and performing and your creativity?
I mean, in every way possible, right? Like I was coming out of a contract to go right back into, or to go right into chemo. And
Mm.
so like any kind of semblance of momentum or career that I thought I was going to have all of a sudden was like put on a hard pause. And then to make that even more of a stark contrast, there were a couple of times where I was either sitting in an appointment or I was talking with my doctor, and I would get a phone call from a theater that wanted to hire me for something.
Mm.
And the one that hurt the most was the Summer Stock Theater that I just loved and adored, and I wanted to work there so badly, and they called me to hire me for the whole season. And I was so excited about it, and I told them that I wasn't able to do it, literally sitting next to my oncologist,
Mm.
and like in like the lowest point of everything, so I'm already a hot mess and like hormonal from all the drugs they put you on. And I had to tell them that I wasn't available, or that I couldn't do it, and they turned it around. They're like, oh, we figured you were already booked, that's okay, thank you for taking the call. And I was like, oh God, like I'm not already booked, and I don't want to correct you because I don't want to tell you why I can't. But there were a couple situations like that were just very like, oh, this is not the same.
Edward, do you think, knowing what you know now, that you would have told them that you weren't booked with another company? You were booked in the battle for your life.
I've thought a lot about this, and I think it's still no. And I think it's still no for two reasons. One, I didn't want to be like the sick kid. I didn't want to go into auditions and have people be like, oh, congratulations, I'm so glad to see you, you're alive. Like having to do that all day, every day in the audition circuit would have been awful. But then on top of that, and I'm sure you're familiar with this on some level with people or have seen this third hand or second hand, that when you go through something like that, you end up being inundated with people who are just addicted to the trauma of it all. And they just want to be around you to be like, oh, I was there for him when whatever. And like they just wrap themselves in this hero cape. And should something have happened, I didn't want my family or my friends to have to like deal with that. And so I just kind of like kept it within the inner circle and the family, and just kind of glossed over everything else.
So then once you were through treatments, how did things pick back up again? Did you have to make an effort to rebuild your network?
No. The scary, sad truth of it is that nobody noticed that I was gone. It was kind of like, oh, there you are. It was like, oh yeah, okay, I'm going back. And I did just kind of pick up right where I left off. Like I was a different person, and I was going through the motions of doing the same things, and I certainly felt differently about doing it. But physically I was still present. I was still going to things. I was still booking things. But it took a really long time for me to kind of regain my footing and figure out who I was in that business. Like everything had changed. Like, I wasn't the person I was when I went in. And so coming out, like I had to like recalibrate and figure out, like, oh, the stupid like 24-year-old kid that like went into this mess is not the person I am now. And you just have to reconfigure who you are and how you're presenting yourself and carrying yourself and the roles you want and the people you want to connect with. And it's a chaotic time, and that felt like not a priority. And so it felt weird doing it, like going to auditions and being like, oh, I'm just gonna like sing a song, and because it felt like it didn't matter. And I had this great moment that I talk about in the book, where a friend of mine got tickets to see Newsies, and at this point I hadn't seen a show since before I was in the hospital. And we went to see Newsies. It was like their closing week, and they were filming for Archives, and we were in the second row. And I just cried throughout the whole thing. Like the whole thing, from the time the orchestra started until the curtain call was over, I just was a mess. To the point where I was like holding my mouth and like muffling my choking on myself. Because it was just this moment where it was like, you know what, like doing it and going through the motions and the process of auditioning doesn't always feel good, but knowing that when you're up on that stage and you're doing your thing, even though it feels empty sometimes, like knowing that there is at least one person in that audience that like desperately needs what you're doing for whatever reason, was the reason that I found to continue doing it.
Did you change what roles that then appealed to you? Of, were there some that you said, you know what, I don't need to bother with that show. Like, I want something a little bit more meaningful, or did you enjoy going back to the fun of theater?
I mean, at that point I was, I'm 6'4", like no one's gonna hire me to be a newsie, right? So like you have like for a multitude of reasons.
6'4".
Right. For a lot of reasons, I will not be hired as a newsie. But it was very much like, okay, well, being practical, I'm a big person and I have a big voice, so let's go for the big person, big voice roles instead of trying to be like Will Parker, like in Oklahoma. Go be Judd, because that's what makes sense. Like, stop trying to put a circle in a square, in a sense.
You did some smaller, not necessarily shorter, but smaller stuff, you and two other performers. For the
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. That was kind of exactly what we're talking about. That was like my Rage Against the Machine moment where, I was like 6'4" and a big person, and there aren't a whole lot of roles for that. And you can count them on two hands if you want to. And it's mostly classical golden era musical theater, which I loved doing, and I was very fortunate to do basically every Howard Keel role that was ever written. So that scratched an itch. But the baritone, which is what you're talking about, the baritone does Broadway's Leading Ladies, and at one point was called Damsels in Distress, was three of us. All of us were like 6'4" and broad, and all rib cage, and we were singing all of the material for Broadway's Leading Ladies, and it was so fun. And it was because, like, guys, especially in golden era, don't get songs like that, that are just kind of fun and vampy and like free, and we're kind of relegated to like, me want woman must be mine, I go get her.
I know that show.
Right, I've done all of those shows. So yeah, baritone was kind of my answer to that. We did well. We like did a little tour that I had produced and put together. We did New York and West Coast and a couple places in between, and it was a blast while it was happening. It was hard. It was still one of the hardest things I've had to do, including cancer. That was just kind of like, everything's on you, like, it's your show, you're in it, you're in charge of the cast, you're in charge of travel and the band and feeding and paying everyone and making sure everyone's safe and happy. And it was a real stretch. It was a learning curve, to say the least.
Cancer's hard, so's theater. Your subtext to all
That'll
this.
be my next book.
Are you done seeking out the big broad man roles, and is it now about the producing, bringing your book to the small screen? Where are you at this juncture, Edward?
I don't know if I want to say I'm done. I want to say I'm done for now. I think the chapter that I have entered by choice / force is one in which I create my own work. Like, it's, again, the roles that I'm suited for in the golden era chapter are few and far between. I don't really see much of me being cast anywhere, and I'm honestly kind of tired of trying to fit into other people's tiny little boxes. And I'd rather kind of create my own box that's big and spacious and beautiful that I can fit into myself. And that, unfortunately, has been staring me in the face for the better part of 5-6 years with this book. And so that's one of the reasons why I wanted to turn it into something on screen, because then I can also be in it, in the starring role as myself, maybe, but happy to step into other things. I just want to create it and have that story put into this zany, like, I've been calling it a fantasy nonfiction musical theater fever dream book is essentially like the alternative descriptor for it. But yeah, kind of creating my own stuff and not necessarily adhering to the quote unquote rules of the industry, that I can just kind of carve my own path. And I've always done that, and I've always wanted to do that. And it was just this chokehold that I had of like the addiction of logging on to Actors Access and to the Actors Equity website to like quick search and get your fix for an audition appointment that you could quick get. And it's taken me a really long time to get beyond that, because I was, again, like chokehold for over a decade, when really what I wanted to be doing was creating my own stuff. And now I get to do that by choice.
Is that can you talk to us a little bit more about the decision to pursue this as a kind of series on screen versus a stage thing? What's the difference to you? And do you have a preference for one or the other, or do you just think the medium is better for this specific material?
I think that, yeah, I think the way that it reads, when I was writing it, I very much had like the Rob Ashford lens in my head of specifically Chicago, the movie musical, where you're like in reality, and then all of a sudden something happens and you're in a circus, and like there's a literal chapter called The Razzle Dazzle, and it is like the height of things going horribly wrong, and it is presented like a circus, and the narration changes to being like, you know, the ringleader of a circus, where it's like, hey, step right, you know, the barker kind of thing. And I don't think it would translate as well on stage. And maybe that's the third reiteration of this, where it's the book and then we do the TV series, and then maybe it turns into something on stage. But I love television, and I love the fact that like musicals have made their way onto television in a TV series kind of way. And I want this to be part of it.
Yeah, there are so many these days. It's wild how much musical theater has impacted TV.
Yeah, well, and not just that, but I was talking earlier about like the darker kind of undertones of it. You know, you have Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, which is like this zany, fun musical theater series, but it's about mental health and like taking care of yourself. And like Zoe's Playlist is like really fun and colorful and bright, but it's also about grief and dealing with family dynamic. And so, you know, like for this, it's going to be this spectacle of, you know, popping in and out of reality and little nuances from shows that you will recognize in the background, very like Alfred Hitchcock in the background with the umbrella. But then also dealing with being in the place of having to face your mortality and survive.
Is it, what's the difference between getting backing for the small screen versus getting backing if you were going to mount this on stage?
I mean, both are impossible. I don't know if I've done enough of either to really be able to say. I've been a part of teams who have done both things. You know, Baritone was basically out of pocket. You know, like there were a couple of us that were funding that out of wallet, and wouldn't change a thing. Was so proud to do it, and that will hold a place in my heart forever. And maybe there will be a reiteration of that someday. Who knows? Of course, like the crowdfunding scenario comes into play with indie TV and film. That is certainly a thing that we're exploring and talking about. There's also the private investor route that you can go with that as well. You can do both. There is a duality there. There's space for a duality. With theater, I think it's harder. I think they're both hard. I just think they're hard in different ways. You know, TV has like this very glamorous kind of like ever living on kind of vibe to it, where like in 15 years I can still whip out this file and be like, look at this thing I did, and there's my name in the credits. Whereas like in theater, it's like you have a playbill with your name in it, and you're like, cool, here's some photos, but you know, they wouldn't let us film it, so I have nothing to show for it but this playbill and the memory of it. And to me, that is the more appealing. That is one of the reasons why TV is more appealing, because you can just always have it. And there aren't a whole lot of rules around being able to show it. But as far as investing and funding and backing for it, I mean, that's a mountain I'm not ready to climb yet, but it's coming.
So do you have your first draft or your 20th draft, you know, and you do have it, you know, laid out? Where are you in the process now?
I would say the script is probably about 3/4 of the way done for the pilot. I have started some music, some songs for it. It's going to be parody songs of other musicals, very similarly to how Schmigadoon and now Schmicago is doing that series. It'll be a little less zany than that, more cinematic, more cinematically shot, and less 1950s musical TV sound screen kind of feel. But very much that feel and sound of the parodied musical where you're like, oh, this sounds exactly like Oklahoma.
Hmm.
And it is, but it's not.
So exciting.
I'm excited.
Have you always been a composer, or is this new territory for you?
It's I'm not gonna lie, I've always been a composer. I grew up in a musical family. My dad is a singer-songwriter, Matt Miskey. He's great and is like on his 5th or 6th album. My mom played piano from the time she was a kid. My older sister is an opera singer and a voice teacher. She was adjunct at Catholic U forever, and she has her own private studio in the DC area. She's brilliant. And my little sister sings. She has a great like folk voice. So I just kind of grew up around it. It's in the groundwater in the Miskey house. So I started composing songs, I think, when I was probably 11 or 12. I recorded my first like album situation thing when I was 12 or 13, and I re-recorded some stuff with some new material at 16. I did a recording just in 2021 with the Cancer Can Rock guys down in the DC area too. That's Jim Ebert. He has multiple platinum records for songs you have heard, that runs this organization for artists who are cancer survivors. So I got to go down there and work with him on an original song I wrote when I was 19 and never got to record. And that just, the bug just bit me all over again. And I started cranking out new songs, and I have more coming out this spring. And, now I'm writing this thing for this TV show that I'm putting together. It's a circus up in here. There's never a dull day.
And your folks are fabulous.
They are. I love them.
If I
Thank
may,
you.
yes, I have
Yes,
to
thank you. They're the best. I love them.
I'm looking at the clock because one of my roles is timekeeper, and Ellen's got a couple of questions for you, Ed.
Shoot.
Yeah, this is our close-up segment. All rapid fire questions about you, Edward.
Oh, I love a rapid fire. Let's do it.
Are you ready for your close-up?
Yes, let's do it.
All right. What was the moment in your life when you knew I have to do theater?
42nd Street on Broadway, the revival in 2000. It was the first Broadway show I ever saw.
And what's another show that had a huge impact on your life?
Secret Garden. It was one of the first cast recordings my aunt ever got for us, and we listened to it ad nauseum. I can do that show from front to back easy. Like, I just know it. That's running through my veins at all times.
What was the first musical you ever performed in?
The Wizard of Oz. I was 9, and I was brought in from the elementary school to the high school to be the mayor of Munchkinland because they didn't have anyone who could do it.
You were clearly not 6'4" yet.
I was taller than Dorothy, I'll give you that.
What is a role that you have not tackled yet that's on your bucket list?
Neville Craven in Secret Garden. Give it to me. Anyone who's doing it, sign me up.
What's the biggest mistake that's ever happened to you on stage?
Oh my goodness, there are so many. Biggest mistake. Oh God. I'm gonna have to say I was doing a production of The Jury Room when I was in like the 10th grade at my high school, and I completely forgot all of my lines, and someone had to come in and save me. And so then I got back on track, but I just stood there in the middle of the stage, like with parents and people in the audience, like, and I think that was like the origin story of me trying to be a perfectionist at all times.
If you could only be an actor or a composer or a writer, which one would you choose?
Oh no. Actor, composer, or writer? Writer.
Why?
Because I think I can convey what I want to say and articulate better through pen than I can through anything else.
That's very self-aware.
And what would you say to the 24-year-olds out there who are, young in their career and are where you were and when you were at 24? What's your advice to those young performers?
This is easy. Have something else. Have something else. And I'm going to say this for two reasons. This can go away at any minute for any reason. I just recently had this happen to me, and I was so grateful that I had something else. Because if I hadn't, I would have been a holy hot mess. Back then, I didn't have anything else. I was told I had chemo, I had nothing to hold on to, or that I had cancer and I had to do chemo and I had nothing to hold on to. So it was like free falling into this abyss of unknown, and I had nothing to like ground me. And so like to anyone who's in the arts, and that's not just musical theater, that's any arts, it is not guaranteed. Have something else. And I don't mean waiting tables. You can certainly do that. There's no shame in doing it. I did it for years. I bartended for years. But like being able to create your own business, being able to create your own streams of income with things that you like doing is the most valuable thing that you can ever give yourself. And the sooner you do it, the more valuable and the more lucrative it will be later. If I would have started the businesses I wanted to start when I was in my early 20s, I'd be sitting real pretty right now. But I didn't do it because I was like, I have to do musicals and it's my whole life. And if I just would have been like, you stupid idiot, you can do both, I'd be in a very different place. So go start a business or something. You'll thank yourself later.
Now, is this your writing that is your other thing, or do you have something else that grounds you these days?
What is grounding me these days? Am I grounded these days? I don't know. No, I mean, I think just any kind of creativity at all. I mean, like certainly this book is giving me the day-to-day that if my job went away, I'd be like, great, I still have the book. It's fine. But there's also I block time out of my days now for creativity. I find that if I don't do that, I'm so unhappy, and it just snowballs the longer I don't do it. So I'm fortunate enough and privileged enough that I get to work from home and I get to create my own schedule around that. So when I feel like I have enough space to take 3, 4, 5 hours of a break, I get up at 5. So like my day starts really early and I can have a break at like 1 to 5 and be fine. Then I can just hop into my vocal booth and put some music down or write some pages of a script, and it really helps. It really helps. And it's so obvious. Like, when you don't go to the gym for a couple days or a couple weeks, you start to feel it and you feel like yucky. And it's not even just the gym, it's like physical activity, right? So like you can feel that. And it's the same for creativity, like especially if you don't have a forwardly creative job like being an actor or composing or singing full time. Like if you're not doing that, you need to make time to do it.
Well said. Richard Miskey. Edward Miskey's 10-year cancer survivorship anniversary edition of Cancer, Musical, Theater, and Other Chronic Illnesses. The book, Edward will wait to see what happens with the TV show. We'll be listening for your music. It's great to see your smile. There are a load of folks in the Capital Region who'll be saying, you talked to Edward. And
I'm charging you with giving them hugs for me, because chances are if I know them, I miss them. They're such a good group of people, yourself included.
It'll be a pleasure. We wish you the very best. You got to keep us posted, Edward.
You know me. You can't get rid of me. I'll keep you posted.
Be well. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Benita. Ellen, thank you so much.
It was lovely meeting you, Edward.
You too.
And for all our listeners, thank you so much for listening. We'll catch you next time. I'm Ellen Cribbs.
And I'm Benita Zahn. Be well and go buy Edward's book.
Thank you so much for listening to the Everything Theater podcast. Special thanks goes out to Alice Grinling for our photography and Justin Friello for composing our amazing theme song. Please remember to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you want to share your thoughts or what's going on in your theater community, you can reach out to us on social media or through our email at everythingtheaterpodcast@gmail.com. Till next time, it's everything, everything, everything.